Welcome back to Port Elizabeth, the beautiful city. This is part 28. Um, the date I did this walk was the 24th of October 2014. And we started in Park Drive. I was going to set out exploring the actual heart of Central Hill. That's the oldest part of Port Elizabeth above Main Street, really. So where the first real settlement was, apart from the obvious one down next to the harbour. So we start with this building, which when I first got to PE in 1984, there was a really nicely designed church for one of these alternative church types. Anyway, not one of the mainstream churches, but that was subsequently converted into this kind of hybrid building, which isn't the most exciting, really. So further down Park Drive, this, I believe, on the left there was the old St. George's Club. I think it was actually a Jewish club. There was a sort of segregation at the time, but later on the St. George's closed and they joined up with the PE club in Bird Street. Anyway, in the same sort of area, St. George's, we saw the St. George's Prep School earlier in Park Drive. Now they also branched out into a high school or college. And this is it, St. George's College. Yeah, I don't know if this survived, if it was viable. But anyway, so we head on towards the intersection with Rink Street. And this is where the horse memorial once stood, roughly, in this sort of area. And that's looking down Rink Street. Now, I think it got its name because there was once an ice rink, probably where the Westbourne Oval is today. So sort of modern 60s block here. But in my book, 200 Years, A Celebration of Port Elizabeth, you can see that Rink Street itself was had some much nicer older buildings. In fact, there's one or two down this side. Unfortunately, I don't think I'll get to them. Nice sort of settler cottagey things which have been retained. So this was always a feature at that intersection. And this, when we got here, was the Star Kinnicore Cinema Complex. So you can see the design of three theatres jutting out in three directions. And then there was a Cagney's sort of restaurant, bar thing, and one of the first Spur restaurants in PE. Very good value for money in those days. Across the road from it is, in Pearson Street, is Oasim South, which was, I see here, I wrote here that it's Advocates' Chambers, but I know there were doctors' rooms here as well. So moving down Pearson on this rather grey day, there's this nice Art Deco Hampton Court. Although I suppose the better colours could have been chosen, but still. And then this interesting, architecturally, I'm not sure how you describe it, but it's certainly nicely preserved. And another interesting building at the top here of Pearson Street as we move towards the Pearson Street United Congregational Church in the distance. So, yeah, sadly overcast and a bit dark. But it says here that the foundation stone of this Gothic revival church was laid on the 8th of January, 1880. opening in 1881 in September. And this is the view down Rose Street towards Russell Road. So we're on the corner now of Pearson and Rose, and this is that Congregational Church. Looking back towards that building we passed on the right as we came down Pearson. So a lovely group of buildings, cluster of stone buildings that this church boasts. And at this point, it's looking in quite good nick. You know, I thought things were bad in 2014, but they've certainly gone downhill rapidly since then. So here's those Hillcrest mansions again, a lovely stately old block. And next to them a small, humble place with a little gable. So looking at the Pearson Street, and Pearson Street would have been named after the same guy who was mayor and established the conservatory in St. George's Park. So Port Elizabeth is actually famous for, I think it's about half a dozen of these Victorian Gothic, did we call it? Anyway, churches, stone churches from the 19th century. And although the light wasn't good, I quite like the graphic quality of these images. That one's a bit into the sun, so we struggle a bit there. So we look back up Pearson Street, and you can see some degradation on the right there. That's the best way to fit these things in. Okay, so there's some interesting low slung, as I've described them, buildings. Now the first one here was for the Deaf Association, and you won't believe it, but within the next 2 or 3 years, that thing was gutted by fire and then basically demolished. And it's not as humble a little building as it looks here. I think we'll see later. It's a double gable. From the side, you can see 2 gables, so it's actually quite an impressive building. Here it is, the Deaf Association established, the association established in 1935. And at this point, it was looking in dire need. Look at all the weeds and litter. But here's the main view, I think, of the Pearson Congregational Church. And we're about to encounter a couple of animals here, I think. Next to the church, a little different era stone chapel. This is it. Beautiful. Looking down Deer Street to the intersection with Western Road. So this is the next street down is Deer after Rose. And there we can see that Deaf Association building. So yeah, you can see it comprised this and a section behind it. So it's actually 2 gables and probably joined on the side there. It's a loss of these little gems that destroys an inner city, a historic inner city. And this is the litter that's next to that Deaf Association building. Okay, here's my friend. I seem to have cats bobbing up whenever I go somewhere. So in the Phoenix Hotel as well, there was one that befriended me. So the view back up Pearson to the Oasis, there's actually a north and a south, or south and a north. This was spring, I think we said October, so lovely flowers in the garden. And back up to Rose Street and some interesting buildings here. Corner of Rose and Havelock. And look at that beautiful wood. What would you call it? I did it in woodwork where you use a special little saw to cut these shapes. Still in Havelock. So another lonely single-story building there. And this is North Oasis. And there's a superb building, and I think the DA used to have its offices in here. But as you move further towards the CBD or the old CBD, yeah, things sort of start to fall apart a bit. It's just this sense of lawlessness you get when you walk through. Look at, I don't know, it's just, I mean, look at that incredibly characterful building with its curved roof. Yeah, but the one behind it, totally unpainted, with an interesting lion sort of on the side there. Probably a beautiful old building, but just neglected, eh? And inappropriate color. Eh? So much potential in this area. Look at this, what's going on here? Such an old-looking historic corner. This could be coffee shops and, first world tourist area, but it's just a third world sort of neglected area at this point. I don't know. I haven't been back here since I did this trip, this walk. And we're back in Lawrence Street, which we visited in a previous thing. And that's the old coachman jutting out over the pavement. Oh, those same things seen from the other side of the road now. And now we into, that's a farmer's home in the distance. That's a real historic building, one of the earliest hotels in PE. Happily still standing, but in a neglected area. Parliament Street is now a nightmare. So there's those lovely houses down Lawrence Street, old houses turned into businesses. And this is down Clyde Street. And here we get another group of beautiful buildings. In fact, I love the way they've painted separate halves there. It's like an ice cream. And this is where it joins up with Parliament Street. And that's looking up Parliament Street towards the farmer's home is up there somewhere. This sort of awning used to characterize a lot of the old original settler cottages. So if you see early photos of PE, this is really prevalent. So it says you're down towards Ivy Street and Alfred Terrace with Leather Lane on the left. So we've encountered this area before. But we're going down Clyde Street, where it becomes Parliament Street, with Whitlock Street coming up on the right. And there's the Holy Trinity seen between some buildings. Look at those chimneys there, classic English style. So this is looking back up to, with Clyde on the left and Parliament on the right. It's a nice row of thatched houses. There's a farmer's home. And Clyde Street houses viewed from Parliament Street. Here we have the farmer's home. As I say, there used to be a hitching post over there somewhere near the entrance, this Parliament Street entrance. And the beetles are missing again from this zebra crossing here. So, yeah, the good old Farmer's Home Hotel which I frequented on a few occasions. Now I've done a drawing of this view. I don't know if I've included it here, but let's see. Oh, there it is. Just a little section there in the middle. So we encountered that church earlier in a previous one. It became a Dutch Reformed church, but it was originally a non-racial church for African people, basically. So heading past the farmer's home, you can see the simplicity of the Victorian era. This is one of the oldest buildings. Peter Mullen started the hotel in 1864. Obtained a liquor license in 1866. So I assume that's when the building went up, 1864. Heading up Parliament Street. So this used to be one of the most sort of sought after, full of restaurants, top-notch restaurants. Now it's become a sort of dive for who knows, I don't get the modern youth's idea of relaxing with thumping music and all that stuff and drugs. And yep, this is where Tel Aviv restaurant used to be, somewhere near this corner here. And I know this Le Bon across the road there was a violent thing reported in the newspaper. I think somebody was shot dead there. I think I'm going to have to stop it at this point with the pharmacy on the left, which used to be a wonderful old building I recently discovered. So till next time, cheers.